Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're extremely excited to share this material with you, but before we begin, we'd like to take a step back. With me, we have Linda Fernandez, who is the Director of Educational Opportunities and Investment Division as part of the Texas Comptroller's Office. We have Joe Russo, who's the Director of Financial Aid here at the University of Notre Dame, retired, as well as the Private College 529 Plan. And we have Jim Malloy, who is the Community Relations Program Coordinator in our Office of Financial Aid. This morning, what we're going to do is provide a holistic view of how families can plan and save for college. We're going to go over topics such as financial aid, personal savings accounts such as 529 plans, and other factors such as taxes and fees. We obviously are not going to be able to go through all of the details this morning, but we do want to provide you with a lot of insights and data and research and and resources that'll help you and your family learn more about planning and saving for college. Towards the end, we'll have an open question and answer session. Please feel free to reach out and ask questions. We're always available. Notre Dame sponsors the Saving for College program to increase affordability and increase access. So with the vast majority of families are going to have some sort of family share that they'll pay for their college education. And so by planning and saving ahead of time, it offers flexibility and allows for the college expenses to be a little bit more affordable. Also increases access. So with higher education and low income families, the presence of a college savings account actually increases the chances that a child will go to college. On the next slide, you can see that savings accounts that are as low as $1 make a huge impact. And so children in low to moderate income families with as little as $1 in a college savings account are 3 times more likely to enroll and attend in post-secondary education and 4 times more likely to graduate from higher education. These students are also better prepared academically due to early engagement and achievement in school. Students with a college savings account are also less likely to incur student loan debt. And those who do take out student loans will have $3,200 less in debt on average than those without a college savings account. So as you can see, college savings actually increases affordability and access. Here at Notre Dame, as well as in the Texas Comptroller's Office, we're not financial advisors. We're not trying to sell any sort of financial products. Really, we're just champions of college affordability. Notre Dame is a partner in the Private College 529 Plan, and all of us together are trying to just educate all of our families and inform them on different college savings vehicles. And with that, I'll turn to Jim to talk about financial aid a little bit.
Thanks, Mary. Happy to be with you all today. We're looking at a timeline here in terms of college affordability, and the emphasis today is on the before, obviously. But we talk with families about savings that they're able to use for college, funds that they're spending while the student is in school, and then when the family has to make additional loans, then the after college years are the times when the loans will be repaid. So this is a very important slide for me personally, because when we talk with families, we of course deal with families who have taken the opportunity to save and been able to save before, and that's key to making the college picture better for the family. So the before is the thing we're focusing on today, and we think that's an excellent thing for all of our families. Next. We have an example here of a family that has saved for college, and on the left side, and on the right side, a family that has not. So student A on the left the family has saved $100 a month since the time the student was born. And the interest that's been earned, along with the $100 per month that's been saved, gives that family about $35,000 if you factor in interest that's been earned on the time that the student has been ages 1 to 18. On the right side, we have a family that has had to borrow instead $35,000, and they did not save. So they also have the $35,000 to put towards college, but the interest that family is going to pay on the money they had to borrow is going to make their obligation, you can see there, $48,720. So obviously, the thing we want you to do is to next earn interest on your savings instead of paying interest on funds you have to borrow for college. So the attractiveness of earning interest on saving beforehand is much more attractive for you as a family. Next. The question of how much you have to save for college involves looking at several different factors and estimating the 4-year costs. You can see there are several sites that you can use to look up the cost and also to calculate what a theoretical amount would be for you for college financial aid. So those first 3 sites are very helpful. Next, in understanding financial aid, there's lots of information to read and understand, but you have to remember that financial aid is going to include not only scholarships and grants, but also loans and work eligibility. In determining your savings goal, it's usually the case that families are not able to save the full cost of school beforehand. So that's going to be something each family is going to have to wrestle with and determine. In terms of selecting a savings vehicle, we're not taking the position of telling you what to do. Many people will consult a financial advisor to determine which savings vehicle is best for them. Next. In looking at this slide, we see how the cost of college has changed over the past 20 years. And we all know the costs have gone up greatly. For a 4-year college, the published cost of the school has gone up 83%. And for private 4-year colleges, the costs over 20 years has gone up 60%. But the lines below them are significant. When you factor in financial aid for our families and our students, you can see that the net cost for the public colleges has gone up only 58% when you factor in the amount of financial aid provided. And for the 4-year colleges, when you net out the financial aid, the cost has gone up 30%. So the importance of financial aid is very key to your understanding and planning for college. Next. The policies on student financial aid, as you can imagine, are going to vary from school to school. Notre Dame is in a small group of schools that meets the full financial need of students who apply for aid at Notre Dame. But other accommodations are going to vary from school to school. And that's part of the task of families who are looking into college for their sons and daughters. But the financial aid, of course, is going to differ from school to school. At some schools, there'll be much more borrowing potentially required. So that's something that our families look into on their own as they're approaching the college years. The savings that a family accumulates and the way that's treated in financial aid is a smaller extent than many families imagine. So we're here to say that the amount that families are able to save when those funds are considered for need-based financial aid, it's going to be a very modest amount of the savings which are counted as available for college expenses. So we want to make that point. Sometimes people say, well, I shouldn't have saved over the years. I would have been in a much better position for financial aid. The truth is that a very modest amount of the savings that a family has is going to be counted as available for student financial aid. Next. And to the extent that families are able to save, it's clearly the case that the savings are best kept under the name of the parent, whereas the assessment for student financial aid is going to be much less when it's savings in the name of the parent. Also, other assets that the families have are going to be protected or kept out completely of the picture in determining an assessment for student financial aid. Retirement plans are not factored into the calculation of an available amount. In many cases, the family's primary residence will not be treated. And in other cases, with small businesses owned by a family, the value of that business will also not be tabulated in the assessment for the family. So the assets in the name of the parents are very key and are assessed in a very modest amount. Thank you.
Next one. Me. Go to the next slide. And the next one. Typically, when selecting an investment vehicle to use for college savings, one of the major things to consider would be the tax provisions. And so there are taxable investments such as the UGMAs and the UTMAs, life insurance and mutual funds, and those you're going to have to pay taxes on the increase in the asset as well as on withdrawal of those assets. There are also options that have special provisions for paying for higher education, and that would be savings bonds or some retirement accounts. And there are also options that are specifically created for higher education, and that would be the Coverdell and the 529 plans. Coverdell is also called the Education IRA, is a former name of it, or an education savings account. So those would be two things that to note with the Coverdell. Coverdell accounts does have income limits, which is $95,000 if you're single, or $190,000 if you're married. Coverdell accounts also have contribution limits of $2,000 per beneficiary per year. One of the neat things about the Coverdell is that it can be used to pay for kindergarten through 12th grade expenses. So anyone who is sending their children to private or parochial elementary schools or high schools, they could use the Coverdell accounts for those expenses. Coverdells as well as 529 plans both have tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals. We're going to focus a little bit more on the 529 plans for the rest of the session. Go ahead, Jeff. As we mentioned, the 529 plans have the earnings and the distributions are federal and state tax-free if they're used for higher education. The nice thing with a 529 plan is that you always remain, as the account control, you always own the assets, and you can control those assets. You can change the beneficiary at any time, and there are no income limits. Most states have a 529 plan, and they have low minimum monthly contributions and really high account balances, up over $300,000 for many of them. And for any grandparents who are in the audience, you can use them for estate planning. Contributions can qualify as completed gifts, and you can contribute up to 5 times the annual gift tax exclusion, which is $70,000 can be contributed in 1 year. One of the things to note about 529 plans is they are savings accounts, and they are also, many of them are investment plans. So they can appreciate and lose principal depending upon market. So they are vehicles that typically have market risk associated with it. Texas offers a prepaid tuition program for their public schools, and Linda will talk more about those later. But there's also a private college 529 plan, which is the only plan that guarantees tuition for in-network schools that are private. So there's 278 private schools who have gotten together, and they actually administer a private college 529 plan. And we have Joe to talk about that in a little bit. And, you know, some of the things that we'll look at is we'll look at, you know, how to select the investment options and the fees in the next couple of slides. When selecting a 529 plan, one of the first things that you're going to want to look at is the home state's 529 plan's tax deductions or any other favorable tax considerations. So what type of tax benefits are you going to get from using that home state's tax benefits? If there are benefits, that's one of the things to evaluate. It might be enough for you to actually go with that home state's plan. If there aren't any, it might open the opportunity for you to look at other states' plans. Once you've evaluated the home state's 529 plan, you're going to want to look at risk versus guaranteed. And that goes back to whether or not you're using a prepaid program or if you're going to use a savings plan. You're going to want to decide if you're going to do a direct sold or an advisor sold plan. You're going to look at the investment options. You're going to evaluate the historical investment returns. You're going to keep your eye on fees, because fees will detract from your returns. And then you also look at the manager for the plans. And we'll kind of go through some of those decision points in the next few slides. There are 3 types of 529 plans. For those of you who live in Texas, you have the ability to use the Texas 529 savings plan, as well as the Texas prepaid tuition plan. Not many states offer a prepaid tuition plan, but Texas does offer one. In addition, there's the private college 529 plan, and that's that prepaid plan that's offered by the 278 schools who are part of the consortium. Direct sold versus advisor sold, this relates back to the savings plans. So with the direct sold, they typically are going to have lower fees. If you're using an advisor sold, you're getting a professional advice, and with that comes slightly higher fees to use those accounts. Direct sold might have special incentives, and those are going to vary by states. One of the negatives about using a direct sold versus an advisor sold is that you're actually doing all the research, and you're doing all the monitoring yourself. And so you're evaluating all the different options on your own. Whereas if you had an advisor would allow you to have someone to kind of guide you through that process. So if you're comfortable, you can go the direct sold route and save on fees. There are 2 different major categories of investment options when it comes to the 529 savings plans, and that would be a static option, which is an investment portfolio that's not programmed to change over time, or an age-based option, which is an enrollment-based or a target date fund. And that has the asset allocation, which is programmed to change over time, and it typically becomes more conservative as the child becomes more ready for college going, or college age. We talk a lot about fees, and this slide kind of highlights why we do that. You know, in this example here, we're going to assume a $2,000 annual contribution with a 5% annual asset growth. And what you can see is, the green line is if there were no fees, and then the blue line is if there's, you know, a minimum 1.5% advisory fee. The difference is the red line, which says that over the course of 20 years, there's about $10,000 that has been paid in fees, which equates to 5 years of contributions. So when we, you know, talk to our families about planning and saving, we really tell them to keep an eye on the fees. And Linda will be with us to talk about the Texas 529 plans and the neat programs that they have and that they offer.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. Linda Fernandez. As Mary mentioned, I'm with the Texas Comptroller's Office. That is the agency that administers the Texas Tomorrow funds. So we have 4 529 plans that are under our umbrella. 2 of those are prepaid tuition plans, and 2 are college savings plans. And we also have a foundation I want to talk to you a little bit about. So the prepaid tuition plan that opened in 2008 is our Texas Tuition Promise Fund. We have a direct sold college savings plan, and we have an advisor sold Lone Star 529 plan. Many of you may be familiar with the original Texas Tomorrow Fund that was later named the Texas Guaranteed Tuition Plan. It opened in 1996, and then it was closed to new enrollment in 2003 when tuition was deregulated in Texas, and we've still got about 70,000 active accounts in that plan. We've also got a matching foundation that provides matching scholarships to the Texas Tuition Promise Fund. On the next slide, a little bit about the administration of the plan. The 529 plans are authorized by Internal Revenue Code Section 529, and then they are established in Texas under the Texas Education Code. The Texas plans are administered by the Texas Prepaid Higher Education Tuition Board. That's a state agency. It's a 7-member board with 6 members appointed by the governor and the lieutenant governor, and then the Texas Comptroller, Glenn Hager, serves as chair and executive director. By statute, the board members must possess knowledge, skill, and experience in higher ed, business, or finance. Northstar Financial Services Group is our current plan manager, and Aon Hewitt Investment Consulting is the board's investment consultant. On the next slide, I won't spend too much time on this one. We all know that college costs are expensive and they go up every day. Here's just a quick comparison of some of the Texas schools, just a sampling. University of Texas at Dallas is the most expensive Texas public college. Their tuition and fees, books, room and board, transportation, miscellaneous costs for one academic year in the current year were $26,734. If you go down to the bottom of the page, you'll see Austin Community College. Those costs were $16,778. So it's expensive. As several people have pointed out, it certainly has proven to be a good investment overall, though. On the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Texas Tuition Promise Fund. This is our prepaid tuition plan. It allows purchasers to prepay future undergraduate tuition and school-wide required fees at Texas public colleges and universities at today's prices. So you buy it now based on current cost, and you redeem it in 10 years, 18 years when your beneficiary goes to school. And the value of it is based on the cost at the time you redeem it. Any earnings are generally tax-free for these plans. The plan has many flexible payment options. There are residency requirements that I'm going to talk about in a minute. The purchaser has complete control of the account. There's a 3-year holding period prior to redemption of any of the tuition units. This plan is open for new enrollment every year between the 1st of September and the end of February, except for newborns, children under 1 age. They can be enrolled through July 31st each year. It's sold in tuition units, type 1, type 2, or type 3. But don't get hung up on that, because you can use any kind of tuition unit at any Texas public college or university. On the next slide, talk a little bit about the residency requirements. Either the beneficiary has to be a Texas resident, and in that case, anybody can purchase a plan for that beneficiary, aunts, uncles, parents, next door neighbors. Or if the beneficiary is not a Texas resident, then the parent must be the purchaser and a Texas resident. The beneficiary can be changed on these plans to another member of the family as defined by the Internal Revenue Service. The residency requirements must be met by the new beneficiary as well. These accounts are not considered as asset, income, or a resource in determining eligibility for Texas state-funded financial aid, which is a very nice benefit. And they're also exempt from creditors' claims. The beneficiary has 10 years from his or her projected high school graduation date to use the tuition units, or the contract will automatically terminate. Now, that time period is extended if the beneficiary is on active duty in the U.S. Armed Services. One thing, too, I should point out here, these contracts cannot be used for grad school. On the next slide, there's no explicit guarantee with this particular plan. However, by statute, Texas public colleges and universities have to accept the amount paid by the plan for the hours that you're covering through redemption of your tuition units, and they have to waive the difference. So if you redeem this plan in 18 years, and at that time, the amount paid by the plan, which is going to be your contributions plus or minus any earnings or losses. So you put in $10,000, we lost money, now we're down to $8,000, and the college's costs are $12,000 for that tuition and required fees. They have to waive that difference. If your beneficiary goes to a Texas private or an out-of-state college or a career school, the plan can be used for that. We pay transfer value, and that's limited to the lesser of the cost the units would cover to Texas public college or university, or the original purchase price plus or minus any earnings or losses on that amount. There's a $25 non-refundable application fee. There are no account management fees with this plan. The beneficiaries are considered as Texas residents for hours paid by the plan. So let's say you enrolled a beneficiary in this plan because you were in Texas at that time, or the beneficiary was, and then you move out of state. If the beneficiary comes back to a Texas public college, for the hours paid by this plan, they would still be considered as a Texas resident under law. Only the purchaser can authorize unit redemptions, cancellations, or changes of beneficiary. All this information about prices and payment options, there's more detail out on our website under tuitionpromise.org. And it would be just vitally important to read the plan description and master agreement out on that website before you enroll, because it has a lot more information than what I'm going to have time to share with you today. On the next slide, just quickly, I wanted to show you the tuition unit prices for this current year. This will change September 1st as we get new information from the colleges about their prices for next year. Type 1 units sold for $118.06 each, type 2 for $89.42, type 3 for $22.23. Several times I mentioned that this plan pays tuition and required fees only. And like I say, that's undergraduate resident tuition. And if you look down at the bottom, you see a description of what we mean when we say required fees. That's only a school-wide required fee that has to be paid by all students as a condition of enrollment, regardless of year, major, or course of study. This next page, I think, does a better job of explaining what we mean by the different types of tuition units. So for this current academic year, UT Dallas 2014 guaranteed tuition was the most expensive in the state. That was the pricing base for a type 1 unit. So those costs were $11,806. At $118.06 each, that was the value of a type 1 unit this enrollment period. You would have redeemed 100 to cover that. If you had type 2, you would have had to redeem 132.03. If you had type 3, you'd have to redeem 531.08. So as I mentioned earlier, don't get hung up on, gosh, I don't know what kind of units to buy. Just be aware that depending on which type of units you have, it may take more to cover the tuition. If you look in the middle of the page there, Sam Houston State University, it would take 75.66 type 1 units to cover their costs this academic year, take about 100 to cover with type 2 units, take 401.80 type 3. And then look down there closer to the bottom, Hill College, Hill County, it would take 18.97 type 1, 25 type 2, and right at 100 type 3. So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit better understanding of what it means when we talk about the different type of units. On the next slide, these are the payment options that the plan offers. You can do a lump sum payment where you purchase at least 25 units and then you just make one lump sum payment and you lock in that unit price for that sales period only. Installment plan option, you can select either to pay out over 5 years, 10 years, or the number of years until the beneficiary's projected high school graduation date. So that means if you have a newborn, you have 18 years to pay out that contract. And you're locking in today's unit price at the time you buy that contract for the life of the contract. There is an interest component including to those installment plans. Our actuary has recommended an 8%. And this is like buying a car. You know, if you pay for it all at once, it's going to be cheaper than it is if you finance it. We've got to make up the lost interest that we would have been earning had you paid us by lump sum for that contract. There's a very flexible option called the pay-as-you-go option. It allows you to establish an account by buying one tuition unit of any type paying the $25 non-refundable application fee, which you have to do under all these options. And then on that pay-as-you-go option, you can make future payments whenever you want to, at any amount you want to, as long as the minimum payment amount is $15. So let's say you get a tax refund in April. You can put a big chunk of money in then, and then you might not make another payment for 6 months, a year, whatever. The number of units that you purchase will be determined on the date that we receive your payment by the sales price that's in effect at that time. So you're not locking in anything on this. So every year as the cost of education goes up, the value of your, say you were putting in $100 a month, that $100 would buy more in August than would in September, because the price is going to go up. On the next page, just a little bit better explanation on the installment plans. Quite a bit more expensive. So if you bought 100 type 1 units, for instance, that would cost you $11,806 if you paid by lump sum. If you paid it out over 5 years, you have a much easier monthly payment, and for some of us that works very well. It's like buying a car, or paying our utilities. We know it's coming every month. We know what to expect. We can't come up with $11,806, but we can budget $237.81 each month. So if you pay it out over 4 years, that's going to cost you $14,261. If you pay it out over 10 years, it would cost you $16,980. If you pay it out over 18 years, it costs you $21,883. So just like any other, installment type option, it's going to cost you more. But as I said, my daughter was in the original Texas Tomorrow Fund, and I went with the installment option because I couldn't afford to come up with a big lump sum payment. So on the next page, one thing that people are always very interested in is, what if my beneficiary doesn't use it? What if they get a scholarship? What if they quit school? What can I do? Well, one thing you can do is you can use it for up to 10 years after their projected high school graduation date, so they've got a little time to make up their mind about what they want to do. You can change the beneficiaries I mentioned before. You can get the transfer value, and you can put it in another qualified 529 plan. Say they got a scholarship for their tuition, but they didn't get a scholarship that covered grad school, books, room and board. So you could transfer the value of this account to another qualified 529 college savings plan and use the money for that purpose without any kind of tax implications, as long as you do it within a 60-day period. And I mentioned earlier, the transfer value is limited to the cost it would cover at an in-state college or university, public, or the original purchase price of the units plus or minus any earnings or losses. And you can request a refund. On the refund, I recommend that you go out to the plan description and read that in detail. There are restrictions on the refund based on the circumstances of a refund and the length of time the units were held. Earlier I mentioned there's a 3-year holding period, so if you were trying to cancel those units prior to meeting that 3-year holding period, you would get less than you would if you waited till after you met the 3-year holding period. If it is related to a scholarship, death or disability of the beneficiary, something like that, then you would get a higher refund value than you would if you were just canceling it. So you need to look at that in detail before you would make a decision. On the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Texas College Savings Plan. As I mentioned earlier, we have two. We have a direct sold Texas College Savings Plan and advisor sold Lone Star 529 plan. You can pay for qualified higher education expenses that are not covered with prepaid tuition plan with a college savings plan. We tell people it's a good idea to have both. As I mentioned, the prepaid plan only covers tuition and required fees. So you could also have a college savings plan where you would also get the tax advantages that you could use to pay for those costs that are not covered by the prepaid tuition plan. You can open an account with as little as $25 per portfolio or $15 if you do automatic purchase plan or payroll deduction. You do not have to be a Texas resident to participate in the Texas savings plans. Again, these are excluded from consideration in determining eligibility for Texas state-funded financial aid, and they're exempt from creditors' claims. Now, on a college savings plan, the account owner assumes all of the investment risk for those plans. And the chart in the bottom just says what we've already talked about. It shows you what's paid and what's not paid. The Promise Fund does not pay graduate tuition. It only pays school-wide required fees and undergrad tuition. The original guaranteed tuition plan did cover grad school, but it didn't cover books, supplies, and all that. And then the college savings plans, they cover all of those expenses. On the next slide, just some general information about the college savings plans. We offer indexed and blended age-based and static investment options. We're very transparent about our fees. If you look at our program manager fees, your reaction might be, gosh, Texas is higher than some other plans. What you're not seeing is some of those other plans are getting fees through the underlying investments. Our plan manager is not. We're very transparent about exactly what our plan manager is making out of these. We've got on the age-based options, Mary mentioned that the problem with the savings plans on the direct sold is that you're responsible for picking your own investments. To some extent, you got some help with that because our board on the age base, our board working with our investment consultant has established which investments will be in those age-based brackets. So if your child is in the 0 to 6 age-based bracket, they've determined which underlying investments and what percentage of that would go into those age-based. They start out more heavily weighted in equities, and over a period of time move more toward fixed income investments. So if you're in the age-based brackets, you don't have to worry about making those investment decisions. If you want to go into the static investment options, you absolutely would have to. And you see some of the managers that we offer. One thing that when we went back out for bids on our plan manager here about a year ago, and one thing that we did is select a plan manager that would agree to let us offer 100% non-proprietary funds, meaning we don't offer any of that plan manager's funds. So we've looked at a best in breed lineup of investments to offer in these plans. So on the next slide, I just wanted to mention the Texas Match the Promise Foundation. This is a 501c3 public charity that is funded through donations, primarily through the state's unclaimed property. People will go in there and claim that property, and they have the option of giving money to this foundation for us to use as scholarships and tuition grants to participants in the Texas Tuition Promise Fund. They have to meet certain criteria, have to have an account, be a Texas resident and a dependent of a Texas resident, be in grades 5 through 9, and have a family income of $100,000 or less. But that's also a good program to help you supplement savings if your child meets that criteria. And on the last plan, the last slide, I just wanted to give you some contact information. We have 2 grassroots staff and also myself that are available to go around the state and make presentations. So if you have a PTA, a church group, a school group, whatever, and you would like for us to come to your city to make a presentation about our plans, we would be happy to do that. And you've got the contact information right there. So thank you very much, and I'll be available for questions at the end. Mary, I will turn it back over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations for being part of this important discussion. My purpose today is to review the private college 529 as another option for you to consider. there's a need to go back a little bit into the history of 529. 529 is simply a reference to a section of a tax code that was authorized in the late 90s, and a few years later it was amended to allow private colleges to form a consortium, effectively establishing a platform, a 529 platform with all the favorable federal tax considerations that exist at the state level. So every state in the country now has a 529 platform, but in addition to that, there is a special program, Private College 529, formed by the Tuition Plan Consortium. Or, as Mary has referenced, over 270 colleges and universities now participate in this program. The Private College 529 program has institutions that provide a wide range of opportunities in terms of location, size, cost, curriculum, affiliation, history, resources. There is a wide range. One important point to make is that there is no guarantee of admission to any of these institutions simply based on the participation in this Private College 529 program. As the next slide will show, the Private College 529 program is different from any other 529 program in that it's guaranteed by the institutions that are participating. It's 100% guaranteed. If the student shows up with a certificate someday, it's been admitted to the institution will honor that certificate, regardless of the performance of any of the investments that have been made over the years. Another important point that makes this program very special is that there are no fees that the purchaser has to pay. The next slide explains how this program works for the family. It is a prepaid tuition and fee program. It does not, and it's only for undergraduates. It does not include grad school. It does not include room and board. Plan allows the purchaser to lock in today's costs for a future college student at any of the participating institutions. The purchaser nor the beneficiary has to select the college at the time the program is set up. The choice of college will be made when the time comes. So on the next slide, we'll see an illustration of how this program would work. Here's an example of a college we call College A, where the tuition and fees currently are $35,000. The beneficiary is 8 years old when the parents prepay the amount of 1 year at College A. They don't have to pay the full amount. They can pay up any amount. If they paid a third of that, that would work as well. The college tuition over the years before the beneficiary goes to school, let's say, for this illustration, will increase 5% a year. 10 years later, when the beneficiary is 18 years old and ready for college, he enrolls at this particular college. The tuition over the 10-year period has increased to in excess of $57,000. But the certificate that is provided by the beneficiary when he or she arrives at that institution will be valued at the full tuition of $57,000, even though they only had to pay for $35,000. So the additional very positive feature here is that the increase in the appreciated value of the benefit and the distribution are both exempt from federal taxation. So the annual appreciation and the distribution, the withdrawal at the time the payments are made, both of those events are not subject to federal taxation. The next slide also offers some additional considerations that are special for the Private College 529 program. As with any other 529, the owner of the account can change the beneficiary. As Linda explained, if the student doesn't need it for some reason, he or she doesn't go to college, or winds up with a full scholarship someplace, or gets into a military academy where there's no cost for the student, then the owner can change the account to another member of the family, a sibling of the original beneficiary, or the spouse of the owner, or the owner himself. It could be to other extended family members, including nieces and nephews, first cousins. The account can also be rolled into another 529 program. Any of the state 529 programs can be recipients of the private college 529 if the family so chooses. If the family does want a refund because it doesn't need the resource, then there are some consequences if the refund is not going to be used for qualified educational expenses. So I'd like to end up on a major point that I had to address over my career as a student aid administrator, which was the thought, as Jim Malloy mentioned earlier, that saving for college will become a major penalty for those who have done that. There's some false assumptions in that kind of thinking. Number one, simply because you've demonstrated that you don't have any money to help pay for college does not automatically translate or result in the resources being there. So eligibility is not the same as entitlement. You can demonstrate that you need the help, but the institution may not be in a position to provide the help that you've demonstrated that you need. So, and very often, if help is provided, it's going to be in the form of loans. And in some cases, a lot of borrowing will be involved. So simply because you haven't planned and saved doesn't necessarily result in you receiving money. As Jim Malloy referenced, there's only a relatively small number of institutions, less than 100, that nationally, where there's over 4,000 or 5,000 institutions, that will commit to meeting the full demonstrated need of every single student who's admitted and demonstrates that they need help. So if you'd rather be in a position to have less stress when the time comes, to be required to borrow less because you planned and saved, if you want to be in a position to provide the maximum choice that you can for the beneficiary, then saving for college through a 529 program, including the private college 529 program, is the way to go. All of these great results will occur. Mary?
One of the big questions, to go back to one of Jim's slides earlier, is how much you should save and prepay. And really, a lot of it is going to be based on, your ability to create a savings goal and put money aside. One of the nice guiding factors is each of the schools are required to have a net price calculator. And so we recommend that, you pick a variety of different schools and look at what that net price calculator is going to be. And those calculators take into account your specific situation, and it works nicely to give you an idea as to what your 4-year cost is going to be. Also look at any sort of employer tuition benefits that you might have or other resources. So, we have in parentheses other family members. College education is one thing to really talk up to your family members about, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and see, if they're able and willing to contribute to you fulfilling your savings goal. And as the next slide shows, it's very quick and easy to open a direct sold 529 plan account. You just need a few pieces of information. Most applications take 15 to 20 minutes. Some of them can be done in less than 5. And all you need to have is an account owner, so a U.S. citizen with a valid address, social security number or tax ID number, and then identify who your successor owner is going to be. You're going to name your beneficiary, so that'll either be yourself or your child or anyone else that could be that serves as the beneficiary, and provide their social security number as well. You'll select your investment option, You know, as Linda mentioned, many use the age-based options because it's the set it and forget it. It automatically adjusts the risk based on the student's age, and then you just contribute. So it's a very easy way to put money into the account. On this slide, we really kind of talk about some ideas on funding your account. So really, small regular payments is a fantastic way to go. Individual lump sum payments is another way to go. Income tax refunds, holiday birthday gifts, as you receive salary increases or bonuses, those are all opportunities to take some of that money aside and put it in a college savings account. Anyone who has recently potty trained their children, maybe the diaper money goes into the college savings account, or things of that sort. We really talk a lot about gifting because we think that, you know, at the end of the day, there's many opportunities when you have birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, you know, first communion, all of those are opportunities. Instead of buying the plastic toys, maybe it's an opportunity to put money in a college savings account where it can go a little bit further. Whatever your strategy, just make sure that you're thinking about college savings and planning and saving ahead of time. The next couple of slides are going to go through some additional resources that you can refer back to. We have a savingforcollege.nd.edu website. This website will have a lot of the information that we talked to today, and we'll be putting up the Texas information under the partner state 529 plans. So we'll put all the slides will be up there, and then we'll actually archive this webinar and post that on there as well so that you can share it with family members or friends. We also have an email address, which is savingforcollege.nd.edu. We recommend that you go ahead and use that to contact us, and you know, we're happy to answer questions. If they're specific to financial aid, our partners in financial aid are always willing to help us out. And if they're specific to state plans, then, you know, Linda's team would be able to help us out with the Texas 529 plan. On the next slide, there are a wide variety of other ones that you could look at. So obviously the Texas resources, the private college resources. The private college 529 plan has on their site all of the schools in Texas as well as nationwide that participate in the private college 529 plan. So we mentioned several times the 278 schools, and if you go on their site, you'll see which ones are actually in Texas and which ones are across the nation. And then Linda has all the information for the tuition for the Texas programs on her sites, the tuitionpromise.org and texascollegesavings.com. In addition, College Board has a fantastic website, and it's got net price calculators on there as well. And collegesavings.org is a consortium of 529 plans across the nation, and so they are also a really good resource. At this time, if you want to email us any questions at savingforcollege@nd.edu or use that form we emailed out earlier, we'll be able to answer some questions. We've already started to receive some of them, so we'll go ahead and start answering them at this time. All our prepared remarks are done, so we'll just be fielding questions for about the next 15 minutes. So Linda, this question is for you. Is there any such thing as overfunding a 529 plan? And what happens to any extra funds at the end of college?
Thank you, Mary. As far as overfunding, the Internal Revenue Service wants these prepaid and college savings plans to
Linda? Okay, it looks like we may have lost Linda. And so really there, you know, to back up, there really is no such thing as overfunding a 529 plan. As we mentioned, if your child has completed college or does not go to college, you can leave your money in the account until a later date. You can always change your beneficiary to another family member. Or you can always withdraw the accounts as well. And so if you withdraw, what's going to happen is it'll probably be a non-qualified withdrawal, so you wouldn't be using it for college education. And you'll have to pay the taxes on the earnings, as well as a 10% federal penalty tax. And that penalty tax will just be on the earnings. Another question we received is kids going to private high school, what are the advantages of an Ed IRA over a 529 plan? And so that goes to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where the Coverdell or the Education IRA plan is something that can be used for kindergarten through 12th grade. It allows for tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals. And what we'll do, and the 529 plans cannot be used for kindergarten through 12th grade. The 529 plans can only be used for higher education. And
I'm back. So
wonderful.
I'm coming and going. We're having some weather outside, and I don't know if that's affecting it, but I'm coming and going, so I apologize for that. But sounds like you may have answered the Coverdell question.
I did. I went ahead and answered the overfunding the 529 plan question, as well as the Coverdell question.
Okay, thank you.
And so the next one that we had is our kids have started a 529 plan by their grandparents who lived in New York. And their state of residence is now not in New York. It's in California. Does that matter? So does the residence of the account owner matter when you're trying to use the assets in the plan?
Not when you're trying to use the plans. When you establish the plans on the college savings plans, there are no residency requirements at the time you establish or use the plan. Prepaid tuition plans, typically throughout the nation, you have to be a resident to be able to purchase those plans. If you move out of state after the plan is established, you can still use it. And as I mentioned earlier, it would be like the beneficiary is a Texas resident at the time it's used.
Jim, you mentioned that Notre Dame is one of 69 schools that meets full demonstrated need. What exactly does that mean?
That typically means that the family that applies for financial aid will have their resources assessed, and that's compared to the cost of the institution, and the difference would be the student's full financial need. And there are that number of schools who guarantee that they will meet the full financial aid eligibility of students who apply for aid at their institutions. So it's a commitment to meet the full financial aid eligibility of all students at that institution who apply for need-based financial aid and qualify.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We received another question. If I roll a private college 529 plan to a state-sponsored 529 plan, what amount is transferred? Do we get the purchased value, or is there a refund calculation or a rollover calculation? Joe?
I am not confident in answering that question. I have to defer.
Plus or minus 2%.
Yeah, there would be a limit, plus or minus 2% of what the investment has done over the period of time you had the investment. So the exact amount would be determined at the time the transfer was made.
So the private college 529 plan does have a number that you could contact at that point, and the rollover amount would be comparable to the refund amount, and it would be your principal plus or minus 2%. But the folks at private college 529 plan can definitely help out with finding the exact calculation for your accounts. How does private college 529 plan affect financial aid eligibility? And is it treated any differently than a state 529 plan?
The private college 529 program ideally would be as favorable as possible for families who planned and saved. I think most institutions today would like to reward, not punish a family with that kind of behavior. However, each institution with its own resources, not with its need-based federal resources, but with its own resources, can determine how to treat any assets that are in 529 programs. Again, ideally, they would be as favorable as possible for those families who've done this.
And can you use the private college 529 plan for room and board, or is it only tuition and fees?
Currently, the private college 529 program is restricted to undergraduate tuition and fees.
Linda, which of the Texas plans can be used for graduate tuition?
The college savings plans can be used for grad school, and the original Texas Guaranteed Tuition Plan, the original Texas Tomorrow Fund, can be used for grad school. The new prepaid tuition plan cannot be used for grad school. What you could do if you had tuition units left and your child had graduated from undergrad, you could get the transfer value, put it in a 529 plan, a college savings plan, and then use it to pay grad school. You just couldn't pay it directly out of that plan.
Jim, can you review FAFSA financial inputting? What needs to be shown on the application with FAFSA? Do you need to put in 401k, IRA, Roth, mortgage loans? What kind of assets need to be included in the FAFSA forms?
Thanks, Mary. The best reference is to look at the FAFSA instructions. There's a PDF that the family can print or view online at fafsa.gov and see which assets have to be reported on the FAFSA.
And Joe, how long do the funds have to be invested in the private college 529 plan account prior to redemption?
Currently, the policy restricts any withdrawal for the first 3 years. So the program needs some time to make its investments and provide for contingency. So the minimum before distributions would be 3 years.
And Linda, for the savings account or the savings plan, can two individuals, a mother and a father, both be account owners of the 529 plan? Or does it have to be just one individual?
There's only one person that is the owner of those accounts. On the you can name a successor purchaser on the Texas Tuition Promise Fund, but like a mother could have an account and a father could have an account, but they couldn't both be on the same account as joint purchasers.
And are there any waiting periods for the Texas 529 plans? I know you mentioned with the prepaid one, there was 3 years. What about for the savings plan?
No, there are no waiting periods for the savings plans.
And Linda, if a relative wanted to contribute to the Texas 529 plans, how would they go about doing so?
They can do that. All those plans offer what they call a gift coupon that you could fill out and send to family members, and say, I got a child's birthday coming up or Christmas and they've got enough toys. Please give money to their savings account. So you would send them that contribution coupon. Any funds they contributed would then be the owner would be the purchaser would become the owner of those funds. So they're just making a gift contribution, but yeah, that can be done.
And are there any annual contribution limits to the 529 plans?
No, just the cap on the overall Texas 529 plans of $370,000 for one beneficiary. But no, you could, and you mentioned the gifting provisions earlier, that would certainly apply to these funds as well.
And just as a reminder, the gifting provisions are?
The $14,000, gosh, I'm gonna have to read it. My attorneys will get on me if I mess this one up, right? But it's the $14,000 per year or $28,000 for a married couple, and then you can do the 5-year gift option if you want to. So then it would be $70,000 in a single year for an individual, or $140,000 for a married couple.
Wonderful. I think that's all the questions that we've received. I'm just going to double check the form.
I had one on, somebody was asking about the Texas Tomorrow Fund. I don't know if that just came directly to me. Somebody was wanting to know, said that they understood that that program had ended. The original Texas Tomorrow Fund that was established in 1996, and then the name was changed in 1997 because it is also a guaranteed tuition plan. It has the backing of the state of Texas by a constitutional vote that happened in 1997. So we stopped enrolling people in that plan in 2003. There were about 150,000 accounts at that time. We still have about 70,000 active accounts. So I've got people right outside my office right now paying tuition for beneficiaries that are in that plan. So it's still an active plan. It's just no longer open to new enrollment. And that's why the legislature came up with the new tuition promise fund.
Wonderful. It looks like there are no additional questions. We're available at savingforcollege.nd.edu if you have any questions when you're going through the materials. As I mentioned before, we're happy to field questions to Linda and her team if they're Texas-specific plan questions, and Linda provided her information as well, so she's got her contact information available as well. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon.